Welcome to Byte-Sized Agency Briefs, a webinar series that packs a ton of important agency information on one topic from one expert into a 25-minute brief. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
This is Byte-Sized Agency Briefs. I'm your host, Steve Guberman from Agency Outside, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. Today, I'm excited to be speaking with Mark Miller, the author of Culture Built My Brand, How to Win More Customers with Company Culture, and the founder of Historic Agency, a branding and design thinking agency for nonprofits. Mark, thanks for joining me from Arizona today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump in. I think we got a bunch of things to talk about, but I really, you kind of answered my bat signal when I was looking for people to help me talk about agencies that kind of hit a crisis, figured it out, rewrote what success looks like, and then revitalized and kind of that V curve, if you will.
Yeah.
So maybe can you give me kind of the backstory on pre-book? Where was the agency? Where were you, and what was going on?
Yeah. So I think before COVID and this, maybe like some other agencies, we were growing, and it was like in spite of our efforts. Maybe we were. It was mainly referral based. We were just kind of making decisions as the revenue was flowing, and didn't really spend any time on our why, our culture. I mean, we had a good culture, but it wasn't like necessarily super intentional and defined. We didn't have really clear expectations for employees. It was kind of like, let's hire great people and the rest will work itself out. And then crisis happened, right, in COVID, and we lost 35% to 40% of our annual revenue in 2 weeks with contracts. We at the time we had a lot of long-term retainers, and those all and everyone even paying to get out of contracts. And we had to kind of figure out some changes, and it was something that I thought, oh, well, I've kind of been through crisis before as a leader in different organizations, mainly in-house. And then the culture that was not aligned to what I thought it should be kind of started to rear its head, and it turned, like the organization kind of almost started turning on itself, right? And we had to make some really challenging decisions, and we decided to make some strategic changes in staffing due to revenue issues, but also in the face of culture. And it was pretty remarkable, because once you make those changes, culture, and you start to define that, things start to fall in place really quickly. And the team morale turned around. In fact, it's amazing as leaders, and this is one of the things that I learned the hard way, like as I try to elevate people and give leadership away and authority away without defining the culture, people can take that and do whatever they want with it, right? And so I woke up one day during COVID and realized my staff wasn't allowed to talk to me because middle management encouraged that, which is like, wow, that's not healthy, I don't think. I mean, we're a boutique shop, so 13 people, it's not like we're 1,000-person agency, right, where that just physically is not possible. I can see half of them from out of my office. So that was like a wake-up call, right? Like, oh no, this has gone too far. And so we made those changes, and make a long story short, we within 3 months after making those changes, we were able to turn around the company. And there's a bunch of things that we did to do that. And I think as someone who's yourself is consulting with other agencies, there's some things I just needed to wake up to, right? I think a lot of consultants say, agencies usually the independents ones start not because we're great business owners, or I don't have an MBA. We're great at strategy or creative, or we have some insight that people like and want to pay us for, or we're good at building websites or something. And then we build a business around that, or our skill. And so like our financial processes were all unhealthy and not accurate. I couldn't get the data I needed. So we brought in outside help to restructure all of that. And I think as creative people, because we don't really want to say the business side is creative, but what happened, I mean, this might be another question we get into later, is after we started getting the actual data, like the actual financial data and modeling, it allowed us to be really creative with how we did our work because we had the information, right? We were in any creative field, putting constraints around something allows you to actually go outside the box and to think differently, because you know where the borders are. But when it's kind of a blank slate, it's always harder to start, right? And so that applied to financial data, which I was not expecting, right? And so we were able to completely develop some really crazy creative process that people think is still crazy, but our clients love it, so we do it. And it allowed us to make things profitable really quickly, spend less time, and then generate more sales. And that whole learning process inspired the book. You know, we kind of had to eat our own brand strategy, you know, dog food, if you will. We consulted other companies, and it turned out like, oh, we don't even have a mission statement, you know.
Wow. Okay.
So we need to figure this out. So anyways,
so loss of massive revenue, had to let some people go. You have this realization, we have no culture.
Yeah,
we were building brand but not culture.
The culture ran ahead, right? You always have culture, it's just whether you want, it's what you want or not, right?
It was not intentional culture.
No, not even close.
Okay, and so you were starting bare minimum, ground zero. Let's treat ourselves like a client and take ourselves through this process of what do we want our culture to be? What do we want our processes to be? And you were using financial data to impact and drive that for you, or were they kind of two separate parallels?
Yeah, so they kind of run parallel, right? So we ran our process for ourselves to really define our mission, our why, to use Simon Sinek's language. We used the term principles instead of values because we want to make sure they're clear enough to dictate behavior, because that was one of the things that wasn't clear, right? We had values, but no one knew how to apply them. And I talk about that in my book. I think McKinsey did some research, and only 27% of employees in a company will know how the company values apply to their job. And so that basically 2/3, right, of people don't know what's going on, like how I should be doing my work based on who we are. So that process we clarified, and that really changed. And when you do that and you build that and you create a strong culture, the culture will start rejecting people by itself. Will start spitting people out that don't fit the culture. You have to be careful because you want to make sure you have culture add and you don't become, you know, kind of this like groupthink situation. But people who didn't fit, like, you know, we had, you know, someone who came to, like, we had a hackathon to, like, okay, the company is in trouble. We're going to bring everyone together. And you're welcome to come to the office or not, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to basically redesign our sales process and all of our collateral and our microsites for sales in 2 days. And so, you know, 2 people flew out on their own dollar to do that. And there's a couple people who are complaining about that, like that shouldn't have happened. And it wasn't required. No one was, you know, that they were doing that on their own. And so that was an example of, like, and that person eventually left because they didn't fit the culture, right? The culture was being, you know, lived out around them, and they didn't want to be a part of it. And so they ultimately left. And so that was one track. And another track was, okay, we have these, when you don't have great process, which is us pre-COVID, you don't always know what makes money, what doesn't make money. But we did know that brand identity for us always took longer than it should. And so once we got the financial data, we knew exactly how much time it should take and how our current process was taking way longer than that. And so we got really frustrated, and we use this phrase, why can't we just blank? You know, you ever get frustrated and you're like, why can't I just do this thing this way? Why did I have to do it the other way? And my creative director and I looked at each other and they were like, wait a minute, why can't we do it that way? Right. And so that blank for us was, why can't we just design a logo in front of a client and get real-time feedback? And and the question was, well, because my response was, well, no one does it that way. Like, I don't know an agency that does it that way. Why would we do it that way? I don't think you're supposed to do it that way, right? And they're like, but if we were to do it, how would we do it? Like, how could you pull it off? Like, take all the baggage away. Because if we could shorten the amount of time we spend designing a logo, right, we would make more money and become more profitable. And if the client has more access to us, I think that they might like the process better, right? Because they're seeing stuff in real time. They're able to speak into that. So we started from that financial data, we were able to start developing a process to design brands in front of clients in real time, near real time. There's different kind of experiences depending on the scope and scale, but we basically developed, a process that includes prompts for the client to participate in sketching and in developing a word bank and other activities that allow them to feel like they're owning the creative process. A lot of it is around the ideation, because obviously clients usually are hiring us because they can't actually design. They don't know.
Right.
But for them to participate in the ideation and then to have constant check-ins and to see our entire artboard, the good, the bad, and the ugly, requires really a lot of vulnerability on our side, right?
Huge risk, a lot of bravery.
Yeah,
wow.
right. And the surprising thing is that clients love it, and they pay for it. We're at the point now with doing this that people are seeking us out because of our process, which is, I think, where you want to be as an agency from the thought leadership standpoint. And it does require a specific type of designer, right? You have to have thick skin and be willing to be vulnerable. But one of the great things out of that was, it kind of aligned with our culture. It gave us kind of this new identity almost, in that, like, we want to be able to reinvent how agencies work with clients. And on the client side, usually when you do a new brand, there's no emotional attachment to it yet. So it can be really hard to sell to internal stakeholders. You can get maybe the senior guy, but then he has to, or she has to run it past another team member, and they're not emotionally connected. And so they have a hard time selling it internally. And we've tried all kinds of different things to mitigate that with video pitches and different things. But by having them actually participate, they walk away like fully vested into what we created, right? So that's been a radical change for us.
It's amazing because, historically, right, you go off, you do the discovery, maybe do some sort of a brand culture analysis, go off on your own back to the agency, whiteboard stuff, sketch stuff out, only deliver the polished things, or even if you're delivering an ideation stage, the things that have legs. You don't want to deliver things that you guys don't love, because Murphy's Law says they're going to pick the crappiest thing.
Every time.
You're just opening it up to them. But absolutely, when they're involved, sketch phase, whatever, all these different phases along the way, now they've got some ownership in it. They feel like they've contributed. They're helping guide the process. You've got this amazing process where you're still delivering your talent and your perspective. Do they feel like, I kind of already know the answer to this, but do they feel like because they're contributing more, they should pay less? Or are you able to, because
no, it's actually surprising. They feel like they should be paying more.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And so and I think that's because, even though it kind of sounds crazy, right? And it sounds loose, that we're just going to design in front of the client until they say yes, right?
Right.
But it's actually really detailed process, right? So there's a bunch of different gates, because we can't just let people say, well, I sketched this thing of an ocean and a dolphin, even though we're an auto parts store and I like it, so let's use that, right? That's not, doesn't
My
work.
Kid likes blue, let's use blue, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. And so there is a lot of education to the process, right? We teach them basic color theory, and we look at, there is a bunch of research that is involved, right? So we look at the competitive landscape and saying, okay, who owns what, color or design or messaging or whatever? How does that relate to you? And through every stage of the process, there's all these different gates, and there's intentionality in what they're participating in and what they're not allowed to participate in. And so it sounds like it's unstructured, but it actually, which is funny, is this creative process forced us to add way more structure and process than we had before.
Sure.
And results in a better product in a shorter amount of time. And so it's kind of counterintuitive, right? And I kind of not growing up, but like early in my career, is like, oh, process is stupid. We just need talent,
Yeah.
and talent will be out process every time. And now I have the reverse thinking, right? Is that process combined with talent will always beat out pure talent alone, right? Like
100%.
And so it took me a little while to get there.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, and you mentioned it. So you can have raw talent and you'll get great results, and the results will be in the client's favor, but the business will suffer massively if you don't put constraints around, we've got X amount of time to do this, or we're going to lose money. We can only do X amount of rounds of revisions, or we're going to, and so you're running a business, not a free logo delivery system.
This is commercial art, not fine art, right? People aren't
Right.
paying us because of what we make. They're paying us because they need us to make something for them. And that's a slight difference, but yeah, process helps bring clarity, creativity, and profitability to any agency for sure.
Yeah. So the rebound for the agency was defined through culture revitalizing morale, culture revitalizing process, financial stability for the business. Did it result in returning to the size that you were, or kind of reformatting?
Yeah, so no,
we're better at the size.
We grew bigger.
Okay.
And so we'll have our best year this year from a top line revenue standpoint. We're investing strategically in some things this year as well, because to keep growing. But
Awesome.
We've had more cash in the bank than we've had before, and so it was like a whole 180. And I don't want to say like it's a Cinderella story, because it's still challenging, right? Staffing is a big challenging right now in today's market. The market is softening. So what does that mean for revenue and all that stuff and sales? But the once you have the culture defined and you understand what process you need, you're able to like make decisions not out of fear, but out of principle. And so like I think before with COVID, because we didn't have these things, we were kind of we were forced to make decisions in the moment, in crisis, right? And so we had to go back to, okay, who do we actually want to be? And we're going to make decisions around that. Like even when we had to do layoffs, or we paid as much severance as we could financially. We let people keep their computers. We paid for resume writing for everyone who was let go. And so, and we made sure that we didn't wait too long. We did it still within that window where unemployment was really high. And so we wanted to live by what we thought our values should be, even though we had to kind of make some changes to really put those into practice, right? Because they weren't into practice. They were things on a wall. So how do we clearly define them, and how do we make decisions based off of that? And the same goes with process.
Yeah, I love that. So the niche that you have for nonprofits, were you guys in that niche prior to realizing what culture means and how important it is and how to rewrite it, or has that always been your
so
niche?
We've always been nonprofit. That's my background. And so we've focused on nonprofit. I think where why we had struggled probably with per project financial viability, right? Where we are that agency that isn't tracking things correctly, and one project balloons. That's what we were pre-COVID. We're passionate about nonprofits. We think that the world can be a better place with them, with cause-driven businesses, even, and purpose. I hate using that term because it's overused, but those who care about all stakeholders, not just financial stakeholders, and whether that's businesses or nonprofits, that's the space. I think our expertise has been in being able to work with organizations that have two distinct different audiences that don't consume the same products, and see the brand very differently. And so we know how to message around that, right? You have donors who contribute financially, but aren't the ones who are being served by the nonprofit, right? So if it's a rescue mission, most of the people who are giving that rescue mission aren't struggling with homelessness. Same with mental health or social justice, or wells in Africa, clean water initiatives, solar initiatives. So that's always been a hard for us. And I think in COVID and what we learned was figuring out who to work with, what are our process, how do we productize things. It really allowed us to start asking the more important questions. Once you have a healthy culture, you can start asking the right questions. And I think prior, it wasn't a safe place to ask these wild questions. Like we'd never be able to say, well, why can't we just blank and then try to figure it out? And that's become like a motto, internal motto of like, if we ever get to the point where we say, why can't we just blank? Then that's a time to actually investigate that, to invent a new process, to figure that out. So
I love that as a trigger. And what's funny, because historically, I would say when people who don't understand what we do use the word just, it's 4-letter word. Can't you just, do that? And it's like, no, that takes 94 hours and 6 people in that.
It's just a
But
website.
but you guys are using it as a trigger to like really inspire out of the box thinking and creativity, and let's develop a system that'll help us just do this.
Right.
And to me, that's totally opposite
our,
thinking that works really well.
Yeah, one of the pivotal books that we've read during this time was a book called Formula X, which is it's a business fable that is about a startup or this kitchen company that remodels kitchens, and the transitioning leadership. The former owner says on TV without telling anybody, we're going to deliver a kitchen in 2 weeks. We're going to remodel your kitchen in 2 weeks, which is actually crazy, right? No one's going to be able to do that. And so it goes through learning about what Formula One does and applying it to business. And so the idea is you have to go slow to go fast. The Formula One race is 90 minutes. The debrief is anywhere from 3 to 4 hours and includes hundreds of people in it. They make 1,000 changes to the car between races, and sometimes that's 1,000 changes in a week to make the car go faster. And so what was interesting is that the way you go faster and the way you go better isn't developing your skill, it's better process, right? It's process for the people, it's process for the outcome, and it's allowing people the freedom and authority to ask questions. And so that's kind of where we got some of these ideas from, is like, and it's so counterintuitive, right? You're like, well, I just give me a bigger engine and I'll go faster. Well, that's not necessarily how it works, right? So you need to reduce drag and increase acceleration, right? Those are the two things from a physics standpoint. And so what does that look like? Well, usually that's process stuff, right?
Yeah. Interesting. So the book is Culture Built My Brand. Well, I'll definitely link to it. I want to shift over to a couple of quick rapid fire questions, but I love the way culture has driven your process and revitalized your business, pulled you guys out of a really tough time. And so I'm glad to hear the success story, and that you've rewritten what success means for you and Historic Agency. So kind of random, but what's a book, podcast, show that you're really digging into right now? It doesn't necessarily need to be business related.
Podcasts, Masters of Scale, it is business related. Most of the books I read are business related. I will say, if you haven't read Hail Mary or Project Hail Mary, that is fantastic. It's by the guy that wrote The Martian. So sci-fi nerd over here. So that's that would be.
You're the second person to mention that book to me this week, so it's now in my universe. I had not heard of it prior. So
that's pretty good.
Awesome. What is a latest hobby or obsession or something maybe you and your family or somebody is into?
So I think I've recently had to change my diet to health reasons. So I'm that jerk diet that has to, like, you're hanging out with him and there's like all these things I can't eat. I hate being that guy now. But I'm getting older, and so I guess that happens. So I've took up cooking, and specifically baking, but using like almond flour instead of enriched flour and other things to try to make baking healthier. So every Sunday night now I bake a cake. That's been fun for the kids and the family. I get to bring the leftovers to work on Monday. So the people who are in office that aren't remote really appreciate that too. So baking.
So home and office, you are now Julia Childs, the victor of cakes.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then finally, and this to me is pretty important, kind of the best piece of advice that you can bestow onto agency owners.
I think the best advice I would give is find a coach or find someone who can talk to you, who can, like, I was always like against like self-help and like, I don't need a coach, I can figure this out, like, you know. And I think COVID proved that like I didn't know everything. I don't know why it took me so long to realize that. I think I've been really good at learning how to figure things out. And so because I'm so good at that, I didn't really think I ever needed something. But having another voice in your head besides your own, encouraging you, telling you, guiding you, whether it's an agency consultant or a coach, has been a game changer for me, because the stresses we deal with as owners and operators is enormous, right? So it's good to have somebody besides just your business partner or your significant other to kind of talk things through.
Love that. And I did not pay you to say that as a coach. So, but I agree. I think everybody needs a coach, a sounding board, outside set of ears or something. So, Mark, I am so grateful for your time. Thank you very much for your experience, your wisdom, and like I said, your time, most valuable.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Thanks again for tuning in to Byte-Sized Agency Briefs. As always, if you found value in this episode, chances are someone else will too, so please share it with your network. Also, if you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love, drop me a note. Let's get them on. Finally, find someone to hug today.